There are some around at the moment suggesting that the construction stimulus is a missed opportunity. I sort of wonder, at $25,000, are you inclined to start renovations based on that? What is it? You have to have just over $100,000 worth of renovations planned. And I guess it's not bad if you qualify, but is it going to be enough? Some would say, I don't think so. I'm just trying to imagine at the moment who'd be in a position where they would be engaging in over $100,000 worth of renovations. It's a lot of money. And right now, I wonder how many people would be planning to borrow and spend that kind of money. Government at all levels perhaps could have done a bit more to assist what's being described as the grassroots of the construction industry. And here's some ideas for you. And I reckon some of these, honestly, should have once upon a time in front of them. And I'm not saying that to be a smart aleck. I'm saying that because I reckon the chances of it happening would be remote. Think of your council. One is waiving council fees and charges on development and building applications for houses and renovations. Councils are addicted to revenue. Good luck trying to get them off that. What about refunding home warranty indemnity insurance premiums or waiving development contributions at local and state level for houses and renovations? Or councils providing a certifier role at no cost for houses and renovations. I'll say right now, anything proposed to save money at a council level comes under the category of once upon a time, because councils are just addicted to this revenue. And besides, how can many of our activist councils pursue their pet causes if you're not paying for it through a myriad of excessive fees? The other idea that comes out of this one is extending JobKeeper. That one I find most interesting of all, because if you're on JobKeeper, I would be very surprised if you felt inclined to commit to spend any money at that particular point. It is argued from some quarters, however, that that is something that would give homeowners the confidence to buy a new house or to renovate. I'm not so sure about that. Steve Chandler is a property development expert and joins us on Perth tonight. Steve, as always, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me, Chris.
I have to start at the end, talking about JobKeeper. I wonder how many people on JobKeeper would feel confident to spend money. JobKeeper is there to keep the job, but there's no obligation on the business to keep the job. So I wonder how many people on JobKeeper are happy just to tread water financially and certainly would not be inclined to commit to extra costs or expenses.
I think there would be very few people who would be willing to spend between $150,000 and $750,000 on a renovation if they were just sitting there on JobKeeper. But I think that in being on JobKeeper and knowing that there is an income coming for them whilst they find other work, I think is what's really important. Keeping people confident that they're going to be able to feed the family. I think that's number one. If you're not worried about that next meal on the table or paying the rent or the mortgage, it just makes a huge difference in confidence levels. And when you go for another job, you know that there's an opportunity for you to be able to move forward. It's a confidence thing, Chris. That's the key thing about JobKeeper. It's just keeping people confident in their ability to find new work and not having to be completely and utterly worried about food on the table.
Do you think it instills confidence to that level, though? That's the essential question.
I don't think it does to the level of spending $750,000 on a new house and land package. No, it wouldn't do that. If you've got adequate savings or very, very low mortgage and you really needed to do some renovations to your home and those renovations were sort of around the $150,000, $200,000 mark, then I think there's a chance it could do. And that's the thing I think that the government really needs to happen is people who are sitting there going, should I, shouldn't I? No, I'm not going to because I'm not sure what's going to happen. By giving them the incentive of the $25,000 or that, hey, look, if you do sort of lose your job, at least you've got an income still coming in. I think that can make a difference.
Yeah, I just sort of wonder, we talk about, and you've given me the figure of $150,000. Now, if I think right now, could we do some renovations? Yeah. a new kitchen for Bernadette would be real nice. Wouldn't need to spend anywhere near $150,000 though, because I can tell you right now, we'd be able to produce a really good kitchen for substantially less than that. So whichever way I measure it up, $150,000 is a lot of money. And if you go to the average house in the average suburb, let's say we're looking at something like, gee, it'd be nice to do the kitchen up or nice to do the bathroom up. I can't imagine a lot of people spending that kind of money. $150,000 as a minimum is an awful lot of money. And what's more, in the environment around at the moment, whereas the idea of pushing the economy along is a great idea, I still wonder how many people, and if you consider the average household income and circumstances where people might find themselves on JobKeeper, how many people are going to look at a minimum of $150,000 just to get $25,000? It's not going to happen, is it?
Certainly not when you're talking about a kitchen or a bathroom. It's one of the things when they made the announcement this morning when I was listening to the Prime Minister. The thing that sort of came into my mind is that $150,000 as the hurdle what you've got to start from. In Sydney and Melbourne, 150 grand you can spend quite readily because things are really expensive. $150,000 in other capital cities around Australia is a complete new home. So I can assure you it's not in Perth, but actually you're not getting too far off. We do pretty well at building houses here, and when you consider that and you take the price of the real estate out of it, you're well and truly well over halfway there. You can actually get for $300,000 as a really nice home in Perth. And when you consider that the median house price in Perth is around about $500,000, and then you start to consider, well, okay, there are certainly going to be plenty of people below that. Who is going to spend that kind of money? And the people who are most likely going to be affected and the people who are going to feel the financial pain the most are obviously going to be those on the lower incomes. So who on earth on a low income in the present environment is going to shell out $150,000? Apart from anything else, I'm just trying to imagine rocking up to your bank after you kindly ask them to defer your mortgage payments for 6 months. The bank's going to turn around and go, not a problem, Steve. We'll allow you to extend the mortgage by another $150,000. Mate, that's not going to happen. This is pie in the sky stuff. It certainly won't happen if you're sitting there on JobKeeper as well. So that's definitely the case. There's a couple of things that potentially should have happened with what the government's doing. Even JobKeeper is all of these things should have been based around what the cost of things are in every state and what the average wages are in every location, because one size doesn't fit all. The government can't sort of set well, they could, but setting the $150,000 minimum, if they dropped it to $20,000 or something like that, it would be too difficult for them to monitor it, because we go back to those of us old enough to remember living through the post GFC stage when they had the Building the Education Revolution, the BER. There was a massive amount of money that was spent in stimulating the economy through schools, doing all the buildings around the schools.
It was also a pretty good rort, as I remember too.
Yeah. Diabolically expensive. Buildings were costing 50 and 100% more than what they would in normal times.
Well, that's always the problem anyway with a stimulus like this, isn't it? The potential is that you're simply going to drive the costs up by a commensurate amount, which means the net benefit is going to be zero. So maybe we do need to look at some other areas. One of the areas you talked about, like waiving council fees and councils providing a certifier role at no cost. Once again, I admire the thought, but I still think it's pie in the sky stuff, because councils are just addicted to the revenue they can generate, and they're not prepared to give anything. I mean, we've had examples of councils in Perth where supposedly the rates have been reduced, but the formula used to calculate the rate, that is, the gross rental value, is suddenly jacked up. And the net result or the net gain has been absolute zero, and in some cases has been increases. Mate, the one thing I would never do would be to rely on a council, any local government council, to do the right thing. I just don't think we can rely on them, and we almost have to move forward on the assumption that they won't do the right thing, especially here in WA because we have too many of them. They have to charge a lot of these fees in some cases to justify their existence.
If you, I mean, look, we all like a good fairy tale, there's no doubt about that. But when it comes to the council scenario, if the councils were being reimbursed for whatever they didn't charge, and were actually paid a management fee on top of that by the federal government, I don't see why councils wouldn't be willing to do it. Because if you can do it where you reduce the with these fees that we're talking about, getting rid of them, that means you can start applying them to smaller projects. And coming back to what you were saying earlier about this $150,000 hurdle, anything that needs an approval, then you're saving money. And if it might be a $30,000 or a $40,000 extension out the back or something that needs that council approval, suddenly you're saving money. And that to me is good stimulus. Someone who's unemployed obviously is not going to spend $40,000. Someone who's on JobKeeper who doesn't believe that they'll be able to get another job, of course they're not going to spend $30,000 or $40,000. But someone who believes that they might be able to get a job and has a little bit of savings, that's a great way for them to go, gee, now is a great time to actually do it, because builders' prices are going to be lower. Everyone's going to be cutting their margins to maintain their workforce. If councils are, reducing the fees and getting reimbursed by federal government, I think it just works, and particularly at that lower end. So, starting from the people who do the bathroom renovations in the kitchens, if there was a requirement for an approval, they can save money. If it's just a straight renovation where, come in and change my kitchen, doesn't qualify. And I don't think it should be something that qualifies, because I think what we need is the larger projects to actually stimulate the economy more.
So am I correct in assuming you believe that basically this isn't going to work? It isn't going to do what it's intended to do?
I don't think what they're saying will work. In Sydney and in Melbourne, I think it might have a go at doing a bit. I had a phone call today from one of my contacts in Melbourne, talking about, I'm thinking of, knocking down and rebuilding. Should I do it? And we were just talking about the pros and cons of what they put forward. So for some places, it'll work. But
not so much for others. Yeah, probably not so well here in the West. Steve Chandler, thank you very much for your time.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Steve Chandler is a property development expert. I don't know, there's the figures. Can you imagine a scenario? Let's say, for example, you have looked around and thought, yeah, we could do some renovations, and maybe they're needing to be done. Would you be prepared to stick your neck out for $150,000, however you raise it, whether you go out and borrow it, whether it's money you have yourself, simply because there's a promise of $25,000 being kicked in by the federal government? I'm looking at that and trying to reconcile it. Would most people do that? And far be it from me to predict what you might do. My gut feeling is no, I don't think they will.